Let me start by thanking everyone for coming today and for tuning in to our live webcast. Merci à tous qui sont présents ici aujourd'hui, qui regardent en direct cette conférence de presse sur le web. I know that the topic of open meetings is of great interest to the people of London, and I'm pleased to be here in person today to address it. I only wish I had better news to report. Unfortunately, our latest investigation has found that 7 members of London City Council, including the mayor, met illegally in the back room of Billy T's Bar and Grill on Saturday, February 23rd, 2013. 5 of these are members who seem to have learned nothing from the investigation they triggered when they met at another local restaurant almost exactly a year earlier. This time, within just a few days of Billy T's gathering, we received 60 complaints, the most we've ever had about a closed meeting. It was clear that the people of the city took this case seriously. And so did we. We enlisted investigators from our special Ombudsman response team, which normally conducts our major systemic investigations relating to the provincial government. They assisted with conducting interviews under oath, inspecting the meeting venue, taking photographs and documents, and documenting the consistencies and inconsistencies in the evidence. We did 2 rounds of interviews, first in March and again in June. The latter took place in the presence of the appointed Toronto lawyers who were engaged by members of council at the city's expense, and were provided with our findings when they were complete. It was a complex, in-depth, professional investigation, the most detailed municipal investigation we have done since we were given this responsibility in 2008. But it was well worth the effort because what we found was striking. The conflicting stories of the various comings and goings, the flurry of cell phone calls just prior to what was supposedly an accidental meeting, the backdoor entrances and exits, the presence of a legal forum of 4 out of the 6 standing committees of City Council. In the end, we were able to determine that at a minimum, the members of one of those subcommittees or committees did have discussions that laid the groundwork for the exercise of their authority in clear violation of the Municipal Act. Finalement, nous avons pu déterminer que tout au moins les membres d'un des comités avaient tenu des discussions qui leur avaient permis de faire un travail préparatoire à l'exercice de leur autorité en violation flagrante de la loi sur les municipalités. This is not a case of the law muzzling councillors who innocently ran into one another. The evidence all points to a deliberate attempt to conduct business under the guise of social gathering. As I said in the report, this is exactly the kind of mischief that the law seeks to prevent. I made 3 recommendations to ensure London Council respects the open meeting law and does not repeat this behavior. I'm calling on the city to adopt clear and written guidelines to ensure that all council members understand the open meetings requirements. I'm calling on council members themselves to ensure that they are vigilant in respecting those requirements. My role as Ombudsman is to hold government to account through investigations of public complaints, publication of reports, and moral suasion. In that spirit, I will continue to raise public awareness of the importance of open government through reports like the one in the 190 or so municipalities where I am the investigator. My 2nd annual report on my municipal investigations will be published in about a month from now. I encourage all Ontarians interested in local democracy to read this report, familiarize themselves with the open meetings law. Happy to take your questions. Yes.
Mr. Marin, I'm with the London Free Press. I'm not sure if you explicitly say it, but you seem to suggest pretty strongly that you were lied to by some of these politicians. Is that too strong a word?
I didn't need to go that far. I find their evidence was confusing, contradictory, therefore unreliable, and lacking credibility.
So what's the difference between that and misleading?
Because once I found their evidence to be unreliable, then there's no need for me to go any further to reject their evidence, and this is what I did. You know, just to give you an example, you'll see in the report that one of the councillors talked about his telephone automatically butt calling another councillor. The councillor who was called purportedly by this butt call wasn't the last phone call this councillor had made. So we may be from Toronto, but we just didn't fall off the turnip wagon. It's obvious that there was no butt calling there, so that his evidence is unreliable.
So you conclude that there was then quorum for a meeting of the IEPC where they talked about the Trillium Foundation and about the Multicultural Association. You don't say too much about the budget, about talking about the budget and whether there was sort of a budget meeting if there were from the IEPC. Can you sort of just elaborate on the evidence about them talking about budget deliberation?
Well, as you can see from the report, there was no formal agenda for this meeting, but there was an informal agenda. And we reproduce a chart in the report that indicates all the various topics that we talked about. You know, it's impossible for me to pinpoint with absolute precision because there's no formal recording of this meeting. But there were budget discussions, clearly, if you look at the chart. There were all types of discussions dealing with current issues that were before council. And 4 out of 6 committee had quorum. And that, of course, meant that the municipal law was violated.
You referred to a standing committee, that at least one standing committee that you thought had clearly discussed matters that were pertaining to its responsibilities or its mandate. That would be the Investment Economic Prosperity Committee. Is that right? Just to clarify that.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Can you help distill for the people that wouldn't have the time to read the citizen doesn't have time to read the 48-page report? What is going too far? I think you've said before, any sit down that furthers public business or furthers council's business is over the line. Help us understand.
I'll tell you, it's difficult to deal with the hypothetical, but what we found in this report was that this was not an accidental gathering of councillors. This was a planned meeting that was usually the pretext of a social gathering to carry on city council business. You noticed in our report, for example, the reservation which was made for the back room, the fact that the councillors went to the back room, they exited from the back room, that as soon as there were any suggestion that the London Free Press was aware of this, they all quickly scattered. It was a reaction that's somewhat like lifting a rock and seeing all the insects kind of scatter. To me, that shows consciousness of guilt. I mean, it's when you take together all these threads of evidence, it's like doing a painting where every stroke counts, but you don't get the big picture till all the strokes are in. And in this case, it painted a very bleak picture of democracy at the city council.
Was you going too far to say that to use the word reckless to describe, I think it's the 5 politicians who were at a similar meeting a year earlier, which you said, not a great idea, but you didn't go too far, and then we're then again at this tease line. Is it reckless? They just not
Yeah,
care?
but some would say it's reckless, there's no doubt about it. It's thumbing your nose at the law. Democracy in local government, as the Supreme Court of Canada has told us in the context of the decision here in London 6 years ago, doesn't peak every 4 years. It should be constant. And it seems to me these councillors have had a very hard time accepting the principle of open government. And I'm hoping today that they can be convinced to adopt these recommendations. When you think about it, the recommendations are pretty simple. One is, don't do it again. Don't use social gatherings as a pretext to carry on city business. Number two, get better informed as to your obligations to carry out business in a public setting. And number three, follow the law. And so I don't understand what the issue would be in accepting and implementing these recommendations.
I wonder if and when you're in another city holding another press conference like this about a similar issue, this Billy T's case could serve as a kind of a benchmark you could point to say, this is a perfect example of what we don't want municipal politicians to do.
Absolutely. I think when we started this investigation, we quickly learned that it would require very close scrutiny, very close attention, that the standards of our investigation have to be very high. And there's no doubt that this is a message for other municipalities out there that you don't get a free card to get out of jail. I mean, we don't just buy any kind of story you tell us. If it's a legitimate social gathering, we have no issue with it. But if it's a social gathering under these stratagems and schemes to enhance secrecy and defy the law, that you will be caught.
But what do you say to the citizen who says, who cares? They went to a restaurant, they had lunch. Yeah, they talked about a little city business. They've always done it that way. Who cares?
Well, I think that municipal level of government is a level of government that touches people very closely. Everything from your zoning to residential bylaws to garbage pickup. I would argue that it's the level of government that most affects citizens. And when they realize that, they realize that they want to get engaged. The city of London's a city that's very much engaged in local politics, and they demand to remain engaged. They want local business to be transparent, accessible. And so I don't think that people just shrug at it, that they don't care about it.
Mr. Marin, Gary Ended from CBC. At least one expert on municipal politics disagrees with your interpretation of the law as it applies to this case. Professor Andrew Sancton at Western University says he believes the law was never meant to prevent politicians from holding strategy sessions like their federal and provincial counterparts. How do you respond?
Well, it reminds me of Aristotle when he said that one swallow does not a summer make. There will be people with different opinions, and that's fine. You know, on any legal topic, you could put 20 lawyers in a room and get 20 different opinions. This is an area where I have been statutorily given the responsibility to oversee municipalities in Ontario. And that's why I have the report before you. And I don't intend to debate with, some scholars, academics may agree or may not agree. They're entitled to their opinion.
The reference to Professor Sancton is an interesting one, because you actually did sort of debate it publicly on Twitter. You've had sparring matches on Twitter with other people. There's a sense, I would say particularly from the people you investigate, who think that some of the terminology you use, some of your style, goes too far. You use the term belligerent here, which they would call editorializing. I'd agree with that. Do you risk undermining the message that you're delivering by doing things like that, by using those sorts of editorializing terms?
My decisions, my reports are not rulings. I'm not a court. I can't force anybody to do anything. My reports and recommendations are the exercise of moral suasion. So it's by being here this afternoon, for example, in London, talking to you, talking to the public through the media, using social media, that I get my message across. And if I were to issue reports in the darkness of my boardroom in Toronto and not communicate my work, then I would be totally ineffectual. An invisible ombudsman is an ineffectual ombudsman. So what we do is communications, carry our message out to make sure that it's understood by members of the public.
But to get in a public argument with somebody.
Well, I'm not. That's what I'm saying today. I'm not getting into public argument. We've had discussions in the past with various people that have raised the issue from a more academic perspective. Today, I'm delivering the final report, and the report will speak for itself. question with that?
Hi, Mr. Marin. William Sorton, I was one of the complainants. First, I just want to thank you for your due diligence in getting this to us. And second of all, I'm wondering if in the future, is there anything in the works to add maybe a little more teeth to your job and the thing, so that things like this can actually maybe, I don't like the word punish, but it seems like a report maybe isn't enough, as this is the second time we've seen this happen.
Similar legislation in the US concerning open meetings carry with them sanctions, individual penalties, fines. In Ontario, at one point that was part of the proposal, but it was removed before it became law. And right now, I don't think that there's any movement to include fines in the legislation, but I certainly would support such a move. I just don't think that there's any political appetite for that right now.
The 7 politicians who investigated the case, lawyers from Toronto, and there's the lawyer's description that this kind of looks and feels and sounds like a legal procedure. They use the term legalistic, but it's a legalistic process. Do you still believe that the lawyers are not necessary when you?
Lawyers are not necessary at all. There's no personal jeopardy. There's no during the interviews. There's just, it's not required. And the reason I say that is simply because you know, there's no personal jeopardy to councillors. We're looking at processes, whether meetings were there. That said, if a municipality wants to hire lawyers, as they did in this case, makes that decision, you know, we're not fundamentally opposed to it. We just don't want to encourage the process to become a adversarial legal process. We had very good rapport with the lawyers in this case. They did their job. They acted like professionals. In many ways, it's probably easier for us to deal with lawyers than it is to deal with simply with councillors directly. So it wasn't an issue here. They were professional, and but I don't believe that lawyers are required in these kinds of cases.
Were the politicians professional? I mean, you put them under oath, right?
Everything I said is in the report, but I want to say today, we put them under oath because there were some pretty glaring inconsistencies in the evidence we were collecting at the time. The report speaks to those inconsistencies. They needed to be clarified. And we have that ability to put witnesses under oath. It creates greater serenity, a greater consciousness of what's going on, and hopefully a more accurate, reliable record. So thanks very much for coming here this afternoon.
One quick question, the cost of this report, do you have that?
We don't itemize the cost of reports. When we received this additional responsibility to oversee the municipalities in Ontario, we did not get extra resources, so everything is done within our envelope, within our budget. So no, we don't have a cost, just like we don't have a cost for the other 20,000 investigations we do here. Thank you.